Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and we got a really great show for you today. We have Patrick Henningsen of 21stCenturyWire.com, one of the best, if not the best overall alternative media site out there on the market. Still asking real big questions, still anti-war, still challenging the establishment and current administrations, unlike some. And we got him on not only because, of course, they are covering John Bolton being fired as the National Security Advisor. I love the headline, A Ray of Hope. It is a ray of hope because if you had asked me in May and June where we were headed to a military escalation with Iran. However, on the heels of somewhat of a de-escalation on the U.S. part, we have seen Israel go buck wild. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to let you take it from there. What is going on in the Middle East right now, Patrick?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, the resignation of John Bolton, I think he was actually fired. There's a little argument going on between Bolton and Trump on Twitter as to, no, I wasn't fired, I quit. So Bolton's reaching out to journalists and things like this. But the point being is this is also coming at a really crucial time. And why is this so crucial right now in the Middle East? Because one of the main things is that, among other things, Israel has an election coming up. It's actually a rerun of a previous election where Netanyahu didn't secure the coalition majority that he was looking for. So that's coming up. And so Netanyahu is pandering to the hardline Zionists and to the settlers and people who are looking to annex parts of Palestine. So he's announced an annexation of the West Bank and the Jordan Valley. This is hugely controversial and hugely dangerous for a number of reasons. And this is also coming on the heels of a lot of altercations between Lebanon and Hezbollah and also in Gaza as well. So and also Syria as well, and Iraq as well. So Israel is basically picking fights, has attacked all of its neighbors. So they're, a very disruptive force right now in the region. And it's Stumm is the word in Washington about this. Of course, they're not getting any criticism from this administration, not surprising. But so Israel's also boxed itself in as well. So after the election, if Netanyahu wins, he could very well pull back a little bit. But he's really pandering to the hard line, to literally to the right of the sort of hardline Zionists. You have the Israeli nationalists, or the sort of the far right Israeli nationalists. This is who Benjamin Netanyahu is hoping is going to push him over the edge in the upcoming election. So, but what's most dangerous is Israel has been implicated in attacking Iraq recently, and has targeted what they call in America Shiite militia, Hashd al-Shabi, or the People's Mobilization Units. But these aren't Shiite militia. These are fully integrated into the Iraqi military defense force. So, and they're hugely important. In fact, it's the Hashid that Israel is attacking because they are supported by Iran. They have been in the past supported by Iran, but that wasn't for any trivial reason. This is because ISIS had overrun Mosul, Tikrit, Kirkuk, and large portions of Iraq, and were threatening to take more. And the Ayatollah, Grand Ayatollah, issued a fatwa, which in July 2014, that called on every able-bodied man from the age of 18 to 38, 40 something to join, and 120,000 people joined the Hashid, and that was the difference in defeating ISIS eventually. They won all their battles on the ground against ISIS. The United States is flying around doing sorties and charging the Iraqi government for it, by the way, and they didn't win the war against ISIS. It was won on the ground. It was the Hashid, mainly the Iraqi defense military, and also Iranian special forces. That made the difference in the defeat against ISIS. So this is why one of the reasons why Israel is attacking them, because They see them as an extension of Iranian influence, and they would like nothing more than to drive Iraq and Iran apart. But that's not going to happen right now, and because the reality is different now. The United States is on the back heels. They're no longer able to manage a sectarian war in Iraq. And so now Iraq is becoming a little more clearer in its regional goals. So they're now talking and opening potentially diplomatic relations with Syria. And that's a big game changer. So you could potentially have an alliance from the Mediterranean, from Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. That transforms the entire Middle East ballgame. And this is what the U.S. has been trying to prevent for 4 decades. Basically, and this is what Israel absolutely doesn't want either, because it's going to mean that they're going to have to negotiate with this bloc. This bloc is also allied with Russia as well, potentially with China. So it changes actually global geopolitics, and that's why Iraq is so important as a country in their position. And this is another reason why this country was bludgeoned and basically destroyed over the last 20 years.
So before we get into the recent announcements from Netanyahu, both on the front of more nuclear facilities that were secretive in Iran and this annexation of more of Jordan and the Dead Sea, etc., I want to ask you about 2 separate things. Not only Bolton fired, resigning, whatever last night, but about this alleged Camp David meeting that nobody knew about with Afghanistan, right? For instance, I'd be all for them meeting. I'd like to get out of that conflict. Tomorrow is the 18th anniversary of 9/11, the conflict that really got the ball rolling in this never-ending war on terror. And not only did we not hear about it until Twitter, but it was kind of a flex, right? He said, well, I was going to hold these peace talks, but then they killed 12 innocent people in Kabul, took credit for it as a strong position, and now I won't talk to him. Meanwhile, the mainstream media and the left running for office get to go after him saying, oh, our president should never talk with the terrorists. Don't they understand that our military talks and works with al-CIA, al-Qaeda, the White Helmets, etc., in Syria against Assad already? There's already communication on that level, all these affiliate groups, al-Nusra, etc. So it's a false argument. But do you think any of this has to do with Bolton resigning? Does that? Why did he even announce the Camp David thing? Was it real? Does he want to really get out of Afghanistan? Or is it people like Bolton who are pushing him into staying?
Yeah, there's a lot of speculation on that. It's difficult to know. We might know. It might come out in the wash. It might come out in the wash. But certainly that's something Bolton would have opposed. Any kind of detente or any kind of negotiations. Anything that would lead to a major troop drawdown in Afghanistan, Bolton would be against. Peace on the Korean Peninsula, Bolton opposes that. Withdrawal of U.S. forces from northeastern Syria, Bolton opposes this vehemently. And the not attacking Iran and coming to the negotiation table between Rouhani and Trump, that this is something Bolton would oppose. So anything that would scale down U.S. military operations globally, Bolton would oppose. You could say that might be his job. That's just why he is there. The powers that be that put him in there. I mean, there's a lot of people that believe that Sheldon Adelson made that selection for Donald Trump a few years ago, and this is one of the people that. One of the conditions for his support, that Bolton is Israel's man, but he's also the man of the Pentagon. He's the man of Lockheed Martin. He's the man of Boeing and all of these corporations. So there's a lot of reasons why John Bolton would be upset if there's no new wars, there's no democratic governments being overthrown. 3 consecutive failed coups in Venezuela, by the way, between January and March of this year. So it's been a bad year for John Bolton. So who's going to replace him? Carter Page was tweeting out Devin Nunes might be a national security replacement for John Bolton. That would be a stupid move, of course, by the Trump administration, because robbing Congress of Republican seats, either in Congress or in Senate, to fill cabinet positions is absolutely a dumb move. And you'd hope that the Trump administration had learned their lesson from doing that already. That's created so many other problems, with Jeff Sessions as an example. But there, you could get a war hawk in there. You could get an arch Zionist in there. I'm sure Israel will have a strong opinion of who they would like to replace Bolton in that position. There's already some names being bandied about. I don't know if you've seen any of them, but there's quite a few names being kicked around right now as a replacement.
Yeah, I haven't seen them, but I'm not going to be surprised when it is another, establishment warmonger. I mean, what have we seen? We've seen Mike Pompeo, who jokes about when he was the head of the CIA, they had entire courses on lying, cheating, and stealing. It was our job. I mean, that's kind of a paraphrase, but almost word for word. And the thing is, the audience isn't upset about that he's our Secretary of State. In fact, they laugh along with him as though it's some kind of joke. And then you have Gina Haspel, who comes from this school of torture, if you will. She's all for it. Abu Ghraib, Guantanamo Bay, still open. In fact, we have the show trials, a.k.a. the military tribunals, finally announced for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 4 more co-conspirators on 9/11 that are going to happen some 20 years later, folks. We're talking, I believe it was not even 2020. I think it was 2021 was when they say these fake trials without an actual jury, basically a military judge, sits there with 3 or 4 other people in this tribunal and decides their guilt based on torture. In fact, Guantanamo Bay being closed is completely off the table. It hasn't even been discussed since pre-Obama at this point, really. Him running for office.
I might add, on the Taliban peace talks, the media is up in arms because it's the Taliban. They're saying that how could they invite these people to Camp David? Even the liberals are saying this. When they attacked us on 9/11, well, this conflating of the Taliban with Al-Qaeda, even if you believe the official story of 9/11, which many people don't, but even if you did, the Taliban did not attack America on 9/11. The Taliban, Afghanistan did not attack the United States on September 11th, even if you believe the official story. The official story says Al-Qaeda did. So this conflation, this historical revisionism that's now popular in the mainstream media is ridiculous, and it just shows you how out to lunch a lot of media pundits are and political heads.
Yeah, well, just to speak to that point, you would think that if we lived in a real political system, right, like some of the other Democrats wanted to win, maybe, just maybe, they'd bring up the fact that Joey B., Joseph Biden, their golden boy, former vice president, was meeting with General Mahmoud Ahmed on September 13th, 2 days after the attack, who was there on the morning of 9/11, meeting with Porter Goss, who will become the head of the CIA later, and Bob Graham. They will chair the initial congressional investigation into 9/11 that has those redacted pages that took, 17 years almost, I think 16 and change, to come out to the public and showed Saudi involvement. But here's the catch. There was Pakistani funding, and that came through Omar Saeed Sheikh via General Mahmoud Ahmed through the ISI. He meets with this guy afterwards. He talks tough on the Senate floor, yet there are allies in the war on terror. They helped fund it. Weeks before Muhammad Atta gets that money, it is not in dispute. Not only that, it's in the Dark Overlord documents. There's only been 3 lair dumps, but the lawyers there actually look at that evidence because they know there's financing there. There's real financing from Pakistan. If you believe the official version, where do they get him? They get him in Abbottabad after he's been protected by what? The Pakistani intelligence network. And Dan Rather comes out with a report less than a year after the attacks, where he's being protected by the Pakistani military the night before 9/11 in a hospital there. Never been a target of the war on terror. Connected to our vice president, who bragged he was either the first or second most powerful man in that country. That's how staged things are, Patrick. And the average person that's not watching this broadcast, that watches fucking Rachel Maddow or some shit show Hannity, has no idea. How do we break that barrier almost 18 years later?
You're asking the impossible question. But what's clear and what's is that even after 18 years, imagine JFK's assassination in 1963. Add 18 years to that, you're at 1981. I remember talking about JFK's assassination in the 80s when I was a teenager, thinking that this was just like this was generations ago. The world had changed so much since 1963. And here we are 18 years later. From 9/11, and it seems like, sadly, we're no closer to getting any clarity on what happened there. But I think in terms of what you brought up, all those points you brought up are true. As far as the evidence, the factual reportage seems to indicate everything you said is true. But in terms of getting people co-opted, placing people in the frame, when the white helmets from Syria, when all of the congressmen, senators get their photo op with the white helmets, each one of those congressmen, senators is then married to that group, and they can no longer say anything bad about them or no longer really comment on Syria in any controversial way because they're already implicated by the fact that they're in the same frame. The same with all of these Pakistani intelligence officials, Saudi intelligence officials, Bandar, all of the operatives, and then people are also rewarded afterwards for their cooperation in going along with the whole thing and are promoted throughout their careers, including Joe Biden. So they've all done their service, as it were. But but that also keeps an alternative story in place. If you believe that there was 19, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole today, but if you believe there was 19 hijackers or 14 hijackers or whatever, and they did 9/11, just implicating Saudi Arabia and holding that up there as a kind of plot manages to contain Saudi Arabia geopolitically in the eyes of the U.S., but it also keeps the public fixated on another version of events, Pakistani intelligence, another version of events, the Taliban, Osama bin Laden. It's endless. So the press, the public are running around looking at all these plots and subplots, and most likely, as you know, probably from your research, that they're miles away from how those events went down on that fateful day.
Yeah, and that's why I made Fabled Enemies. I wanted to show people, look, this is a multifaceted international intelligence operation. That's not how it worked. I mean, if you want to just look at the hijackers, look, they were absolutely protected. Many of them trained at U.S. schools. The Defense Language School in Monterey, California. Maxwell Air Force Base being two. Khalid al-Mihdhar was living with and renting from an FBI informant. At the same time, he was named by James Woods as one of 4 hijackers in August on Flight 11. This just came out in the Dark Overlords, fleshed out from what he'd been talking about, where the pilot, the stewardess, and James Woods all filed reports weeks before 9/11 on a guy with 3 other people they thought were going to hijack a plane. Waleed al-Shehri, who's living next to his neighbor's Diane Albritton, has the CIA called on by her, and nothing is done. Able Danger is following these people. The consulate they came from in Saudi Arabia was outed by Michael Springman as a base to get intelligence assets through for the CIA. There are so many holes in the story just based on what we know publicly surrounding those peoples. We don't even have to get into the buildings like we just did with Richard Gage, etc. There are problems, and you're right to fit a narrative where it was Al-Qaeda or Afghanistan or, Saddam Hussein helped bin Laden. Remember, that narrative is still out there somewhere. In fact, pre-9/11, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but Yosef Bodansky writes the book, The Man Who Declared War on America, in 1999. It's about bin Laden. This guy's still on all sorts of counterterrorism groups. He's a dual Israeli citizen. And even then, Patrick, in 99, when he sits next to Brian Lamb selling the book, he's trying to sell the public on an Iraq and an Iran connection to bin Laden and terror. This is pre-9/11. This is all precognitive programming. So I want to ask you, what happens after the election in Israel? Do we have a full-on military conflict in the Middle East, or do we see more of these pocket installations of smart bombings and an escalation back and forth? Now we have Hezbollah shooting down drones. Oh no, they shot down our robot. But where does it go?
Well, Netanyahu's made a lot of interesting statements. One of them is that he's almost guaranteeing that he's going to confront Iran at last. And again, I think he's talking to the hardliners, because this is what the hardliners want to hear. The reality, though, is even with all of this bluster and mad dog posturing by this Israeli zombie prime minister right now, the facts on the ground have changed radically in the last couple of years. I talked about the difference in Iraq, the defeat of ISIS and what that meant in terms of changing the geopolitical reality in Iraq, and now Iran and Iraq are together. Syria and Iraq may be together. Lebanon and Syria are much closer together than they were in previous years because of the assassination of Rafiq Hariri, and that was blamed on Damascus, etc. And all of these things that were, all these wedges that were inserted to divide all of these ostensibly Arab nationalist countries in the Middle East and in Iran as well. Those wedges are no longer in there, and they're going to have a hard time getting them in there again. So in terms of what Israel wants to do, Israel's priority strictly is to increase its size, to increase its land holdings, to gain water resources, whether that's in the Litani River in Lebanon or the Golan Heights, oil resources, gas resources, offshore as well, the Leviathan gas fields offshore, off of Gaza as well, off the coast of Gaza, increasing its buffer security zones, maybe in the Sinai, for instance, securing and pushing the Palestinians out eventually, even if that takes 100 years. They're very patient, and they're willing to buckle down and do that. So for Israel, it's about increasing its size. It's about securing its security for its inhabitants. It's about carrying on the two-state solution, which is a scam. This was a scam from the beginning, at the beginning of the Oslo peace process. This was designed to buy time, to build 600, to get 600,000 settlers into Palestinian territory, and then just stretch this out. And they're still pumping the two-state solution. Watch the Democratic debates, and you can see some of these candidates have their talking points, like Jared Kushner has his talking points. We want a two-state solution. There is no two-state solution. They want to annex what's remaining of Palestinian land, have a few Palestinian ghettos, basically, and eventually somehow deal with them, drive them out at the very end. And so there is no two-state solution. There's no state for the Palestinians. And even if they are granted a state, they'll have no control over their water, their air, their power, their travel, broadcast airwaves, food, any supplies coming in and out, their highways, their byways. They have no control over any of this. Israel will never give them control over any of that. So it would only be a state in name, and even then, a pathetic state when you look at what they used to have in terms of land pre-1967, what they have left now. So, but it's keeping this facade going for as long as possible to realize their objectives on the ground, and with the help of the United States doing that, a lot of deception at play. A lot of charts that Netanyahu has showing Iranian's nuclear power program, and he's got another chart out about how they're being threatened with from these different sides, when in fact that they're doing the threatening of their neighbors. So this is all smoke and mirrors that's designed to bamboozle a largely clueless U.S. public into sort of supporting, and the Sean Hannitys of the world on Fox, and they're right there sort of backing Israel at every turn, making sure that section of the electorate is on board. Talk radio, conservative talk radio, Sebastian Gorkas of the world, all of these arch Zionists, these people are just polluting the U.S. airwaves with lies that Iran is the #1 state sponsor of terror in the world, and that they're backing ISIS. And I mean, they've lost so much lives. I mean, there's so much blood has been spilled, Iranian blood, fighting Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and the U.S. has spilled no blood on the ground. We've hardly lost anybody in the fight against ISIS in Iraq or Syria or elsewhere. supposedly.
Gee, I wonder why that is, Patrick. It's so weird, when they were rolling around in those Chevy trucks with AK-47s. I wonder why we haven't spilled much blood against ISIS. It's just so bizarre.
Because we've been we've been in the air, flying around, chalking up huge bills on sorties, dropping lots of bombs, not all of them hitting real targets, maybe killing some operatives and some ISIS fighters here and there to liquidate certain areas, to basically destroy evidence, so that when people go in to check with the remnants, there's no ISIS paperwork. And they got in a lot of trouble in Syria with people going into liberated areas, and then myself included, into East Aleppo, for instance, and finding the documentation of Western NGOs aiding al-Qaeda affiliates and militants there, and they weren't moderate rebels. And you can see the paper trail. And journalists are doing this all over the place in Iraq and Syria, so the U.S. would like nothing more than to, incinerate some of those sites. And I think there's a lot of they were doing that in Raqqa, and the devastating results for the people on the ground, of course. But the real people fighting on the ground are Syrians or Russians or Iranians, is Hashid Iraqi Shiite militia, Iraqi soldiers in the military. These people have, laid down their lives to defeat terrorism on the ground. And that's where the real battle is won. It's on the ground. It's not in the air against ISIS. Although it's important to have an air force, and Russia has made a big difference in the Syrian war. But really, Hezbollah have lost a lot of men over the last 8 years from al-Qaeda and fighting ISIS as well. A lot, and young men as well. So they're fighting terrorism, and the U.S. is declaring them a terrorist organization and sanctioning them. Same with Iran. Same with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. These people are actually fighting ISIS on the ground. We should be working with them. If we really want to get rid of terrorism, if we really want to fight terrorism, we should be coordinating with them. We should be sharing efforts to rid the region of these absolute maniacs. But we're not doing that. And we haven't been doing that, and we're continuing really not to do that. Instead, we're attacking the people who are fighting ISIS and al-Qaeda. So something's not right with this picture.
No, something isn't. Patrick, I thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything you want to close out with? 21stcenturywire.com is the website. How can people support you, my friend?
Well, they can support us. We're absolutely supported by our readers and listeners to the Sunday Wire radio show on Sunday, every Sunday, and also people that are join and subscribe and become a member at 21wire.tv. This is our members site, and we offer some premium content there. But really, it's just about people who want to support the type of work and investigations that we're doing ongoing, both on the ground, audio, video, written work. So we try to do a bit of everything.
Well, you do great work over there. I encourage people to go over to 21stcenturywire.com and help him out. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll have you on soon. Thanks again, Patrick. Patrick does absolutely fantastic, amazing work, and I'm encouraging people to go check him out over there. That being said, I'm a documentary filmmaker. If you do want to know the truth about 9/11, I've got 2 films for you. You can watch for free today, tomorrow, whenever. Loose Change Final Cut, Fabled Enemies. They are over on my YouTube page, the one you're watching right now in the playlist, over at Documentaries, with Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined, and Shade, the motion picture. I give everything I do away for free. Please watch it, share it, make copies, hand it out. And I'm doing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 videos sometimes a day on numerous subjects that matter, subjects that go well beyond the left-right paradigm. That's not what we're about here. We're about truth to power. So make sure you're thumbing this video up, sharing it out there, ringing that bell once you're subscribed. And if you're not subscribed, what are you waiting for? Now's the time to join the Burmis Brigade, and I'm doing it with your help. $5, $10, $15, anything helps me out over at my GoFundMe. No Patreon, no Subscribe Star, no bonus content. Don't got the time. I'm an uncle. I'm taking care of kids. In fact, if you were here earlier and my phone was ringing, that was the kids trying to call me because I forgot they're on their second day of school, and they call me while they go to the club. So I've got to give them a call right now, guys, and I'm going to do that, and I love you. I'll see you on the flip side.